Go ahead and open in your Bibles to Acts chapter 25. Acts chapter 25 as we continue along in the book of Acts, kind of rounding that last corner, into the home stretch here with the last few chapters. I'm going to start reading here in verse 10. I think our passage today starts in verse 13. I'm going to back up a little bit. And this is Paul on trial. He said, so Paul said, I stand at Caesar's judgment seat where I ought to be judged. To the Jews I have done no wrong, as you very well know. For if I am an offender or have committed anything deserving of death, I do not object to dying. But if there is nothing in these things of which these men accuse me, no one can deliver me to them. I appeal to Caesar. Then Festus, when he had conferred with the council, answered, You have appealed to Caesar you shall go. And after some days, King Agrippa and Bernice came to Caesarea to greet Festus. And when they had been there many days, Festus laid Paul's case before the king, saying, There is a certain man left a prisoner by Felix, about whom the chief priests and the elders of the Jews informed me, when I was in Jerusalem, asking for a judgment against him. To them I answered, It is not the custom of the Romans to deliver any man to destruction before the accused meets the accusers face to face and has opportunity to answer for himself concerning the charges against him. Therefore, when they had come together, without any delay, the next day I sat on the judgment seat and commanded the man be brought in. When the accusers stood up, they brought no accusation against him of such things as I supposed, but had some questions against him about their own religion and about a certain Jesus who had died and whom Paul affirmed to be alive. And because I was uncertain of such questions, I asked whether he was willing to go to Jerusalem and there be judged concerning these matters. But when Paul appealed to be reserved for the decision of Augustus, I commanded him to be kept till I could send him to Caesar. Then Agrippa said to Festus, I also would like to hear the man myself. Tomorrow, he said, you shall hear him. So the next day, when Agrippa and Bernice had come with great pomp and had entered the auditorium with the commanders and the prominent men of the city, at Festus's command, Paul was brought in. And Festus said, King Agrippa and all men who are here present with us, you see this man about whom the whole assembly of the Jews petitioned me, both at Jerusalem and here, crying out that he was not fit to live any longer. But when I found that he had committed nothing deserving of death, and that he himself had appealed to Augustus, I decided to send him. I have nothing certain to write to my Lord concerning him. Therefore I have brought him out before you, and especially before you, King Agrippa, so that after the examination has taken place, I may have something to write. For it seems to me unreasonable to send a prisoner and not specify the charges against him. Then Agrippa said to Paul, You are permitted to speak for yourself. But we'll get to Paul's answer next week. Today we're looking at this interchange about, with Festus and Agrippa, and all right, what are we supposed to do? So just a little recap that brought us here. Paul, of course, was arrested in Jerusalem on false charges about violating the temple. He was under threat of assassination, so the commander there sent him off to Caesarea for safety. Also, because Paul's a Roman citizen, the Roman governor, would be the right person whose jurisdiction he was under. The governor, Felix, even though he recognized that Paul was innocent, he didn't want to ruffle feathers with the leadership of the Jews, so he kept Paul in prison, and he was hoping that maybe Paul would bribe him to let him go. And so Paul stays in prison for 2 years at this point. Felix gets replaced. He's assigned somewhere else. Festus becomes the governor, and the Jews immediately come, and they want Paul to be found guilty and to be executed. Festus holds a trial. He finds nothing Paul is guilty of. And remember, through this whole ordeal, Paul hasn't been so concerned with his own situation and his own release. He's sharing the gospel. He's just taking the circumstances as they are as an opportunity to share the gospel. With that opportunity drying up, the Jews demanding his execution, Festus seeming to be indifferent, Paul appeals to Caesar so he could be sent to Rome. And what's interesting is Paul has always kind of had his focus on Rome, right? He's been wanting to go to Rome and beyond, into Spain and all that other, just take the gospel wherever he could. And so now, here we are. He's had his trial before Felix. He's had his trial before Festus. But now some other dignitaries come to town to visit Festus. And that's where we find ourselves in verse 13. So we're going to go through. There's a few interesting historical tidbits and just kind of unfold the story. But then we're going to end with a bit of a, I don't know, one of those little things that's just kind of buried in there. It's not the point of the text, but it brings to mind an interesting question. And we'll take a look at that here in a minute. Verse 13, after some days, King Agrippa and Bernice came to Caesarea to greet Festus. And if you're reading through that and you hear Agrippa and Bernice and you think, who? Some random people I've never heard of are showing up? Well, just a little quick history lesson for those of you who enjoy that sort of thing. The rest of you, there's blankets and pillows about. Agrippa is Agrippa the Second. He's the grandson of Herod the Great. Right, Herod the Great, he was the king over Judea, over the land of Israel, under Roman rule, but he was the client king serving for them. Whenever Jesus was born, and he's the one that commanded the slaughter of the innocents there in Bethlehem. And then he dies, and who takes over, it's actually split up to a few different areas, but one of the people who take over for him is his son Agrippa the First. Agrippa the First is the one who in Acts 12, God basically strikes him down because the people are praising him with holy, honorific, as if he's a deity, and he accepts it and, basically, claims that he is like a god. And so God says, no, there's only one God in Israel, and strikes him down. Agrippa the Second is his son, and he controls kind of the eastern, northern part there of Galilee, around the Sea of Galilee, and probably would be modern-day Jordan, probably that area. And basically, he's just a local authority that's kind of there to help keep the people in line for the Romans. And with him is actually his sister, Bernice. His sister, not his wife. She is the daughter of Herod Agrippa the First. Interesting, really, story about her. She was married and widowed 2 times by the age of 20. She was married when she was 13 to a wealthy merchant. He died about the time she was 15, and then she was married again to her uncle, and they had a couple of kids. But then whenever she was 20, he died, and then she ruled in his place as kind of the queen regent for whenever her son came of age that he could rule. But in the midst of all that, change of emperor, and the new emperor said, no, you're out, we're putting someone else in. And so she goes and lives out most of the rest of her life with her brother, Agrippa the Second. She appears to be a co-ruler with him, and some accounts indicate that she was also his consort. Neither one of them ever married, and I know that is exactly how it sounds. But a new governor comes to the area, and being local dignitaries, they figure they need to go and give, welcome to the new governor. And so Agrippa and Bernice come to welcome Festus. Verse 14. And when they had been there many days, Festus laid Paul's case before King Agrippa. Where'd that come from? I think it is interesting how they're there for many days, and then it's almost like Festus is like, oh yeah, by the way, I almost forgot. There's this guy, Paul, that was here from Felix. I don't know what to do with him. Almost an afterthought. And so that's really interesting. We'll actually come back to that here in a little bit. But when they had been there many days, Festus laid Paul's case before the king, saying, there's a certain man left prisoner by Felix, about whom the chief priests and elders of the Jews informed me, when I was in Jerusalem asking for a judgment against him. To them I answered, it is not the custom of the Romans to deliver any man to destruction before the accused meets the accusers face to face and has opportunity to answer for himself concerning the charges against him. You ever notice how Roman principles and values are kind of give and take, right? It's like the pirate code. It's really more of a guideline, right? They very easily just kind of set aside that whole idea of facing your accuser whenever it benefits them. But anyway, verse 17. Therefore, when they had come together without any delay, the next day I sat in judgment seat and commanded the man be brought in. And when the accuser stood up, they brought no accusation against him of such things as I supposed. You have to think, he's like, okay, here I am. I'm new in town trying to get my lay of the land. Here come the Jewish leaders. They're saying there's this horrible criminal who must be put to death. So what's he thinking? He's thinking rebellion. He's thinking murder, right? He's thinking some kind of, slave revolt leader or something. I mean, who knows? And then whenever they bring their charges, it's about religious stuff. He doesn't really care. Verse 19, but they had some questions against him about their own religion and about a certain Jesus who had died, but whom Paul affirmed to be alive. Because I was uncertain of such questions, I asked whether he was willing to go to Jerusalem and there be judged concerning these matters. But when Paul appealed to be reserved to the decision of Augustus, I commanded him to be kept till I could send him to Caesar. And then Agrippa said to Festus, I also would like to hear the man myself. Tomorrow, he said, you shall hear him. So Festus, he wants some insight. Agrippa, he's from the area. He knows about Jews. He's also kind of curious. So he's like, okay, well, maybe if you listen to him, you can give me some information. And so the plan is set to hear Paul. A couple of interesting little tidbits here in the text. He refers to the emperor by two different names here. He refers to him by Augustus and then refers to him as Caesar. And what's really interesting is whenever you look into the history at the time, who is the emperor? Nero. Okay, wait a minute. So Nero's the emperor, but he's being called Augustus. What, wasn't Augustus the emperor before Nero? Yes. And Caesar, that was Julius Caesar. And why is Nero being called Augustus and Caesar? Why are the names seeming so switchable? It was actually a common practice that they would take on names of previous rulers whose kind of prestige they wanted to attach themselves to. And Nero, who was not from some big family like that and didn't have his own acclaim, he just tagged on names to himself. Caesar, it was actually originally the family name of Julius Caesar. That was just his name, Julius Caesar. But then he became the dictator of the Roman Republic, and so Caesar just kind of got attached with the ruler of Rome. And then Augustus was the first emperor. That's when it switched from republic to empire. And but because Julius Caesar was so well respected and upheld as a great ruler, the name Caesar became synonymous with being the emperor. And so it was Augustus Caesar. But then Augustus was rather prominent and expanded the borders and all sorts of things in his own right. And so Nero, who becomes emperor, now he takes on Caesar because that's become the title for the emperor, but he also wants to associate himself with the prestige and the honor of Augustus. And so he takes that name as a title. Nero's actual full name as emperor is Nero Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus. That Germanicus refers to the wars against the Germanic tribes, and it came to symbolize, strength and bravery. So even though Nero didn't actually fight in those wars, he takes the name on himself just to boost his prestige. And so that's why he's being referred to as Augustus, even though he's not Augustus, and by Caesar, even though he's not Julius Caesar. The names were taken to kind of give some prestige. Like James walks around calling himself Lambert. It's kind of weird, but okay. Might try that. James Duhan Lambert. No, it doesn't really, you're not allowed. Lambert, yeah. Well. So, it might actually backfire on you. So, so if you're ever reading, you're trying to parse out, they keep talking about Caesar and Augustus and this, why do they have so many different names for the same? That's why, because the Romans trying to give prestige to themselves, tag other names on theirs as titles. And so, verse 23, so the next day, when Agrippa and Bernice had come with great pomp and had entered the auditorium with the commanders and the prominent men of the city, at Festus's command, Paul was brought in. I like how it says that they came in with great pomp. Everyone else kind of comes in, and then Agrippa and Bernice, they have to come in with great fanfare. Look at me, aren't I wonderful? I'm the king. And so, aren't I so important? So then they bring in Paul, verse 24. And Festus said, King Agrippa and all the men who are here present with us, you see this man about whom the whole assembly of the Jews petitioned me, both at Jerusalem and here, crying out that he was not fit to live any longer. But when I found that he had committed nothing deserving of death, and that he himself had appealed to Augustus, I decided to send him. I have nothing certain to write to my Lord concerning him. Therefore, I have brought him out before you, and especially before you, King Agrippa, so that after the examination has taken place, I may have something to write. For it seems to me unreasonable to send a prisoner and not to specify the charges against him. The situation's so crazy, Festus doesn't even know what to put down on the paperwork. Right? Rome was really big on record keeping and paperwork and, forms signed in triplicate and all, and so he's like, okay, I'm sending him on appeal to Caesar. I need to be able to tell Caesar what his crime is. And he's got nothing. He didn't know what to write. And he didn't want to look like a total fool sending someone without charges, but he didn't have any charges. Paul hasn't done anything. And so he gathers everyone there to see. It's interesting, even pagan unbelievers can recognize that there should at least be a reason that you put someone to death. That, accusation should actually have to be backed up with evidence. But I want to go back. I want to go back and look at verse 14, because something here, and maybe it's just me reading into it, but at least it gives me a good, springing off point to, preach a sermon. So in verse 14, it says that when they had been there many days, right? So Agrippa and Bernice come to town, and after they had been there many days, they're doing all sorts of other things, talking about all kinds of other things. And then Festus laid out Paul's case before the king. It's really interesting because as we read the book of Acts, we see Paul is the main character at this point. Starting back in chapter 12 or 13, Paul kind of became the main focus. I mean, God is moving, the gospel's being preached, the Spirit's moving, people are becoming Christians, churches are being planted all over the world because of Paul. But to Festus, he's just some guy over in a jail cell. We know that Paul is Christ's chosen apostle to the Gentiles, someone who's able to cast out demons, someone who, just his shadow passing by, people get healed. He's probably the church planting world record holder, planting more churches than anyone in history. He is a man because of whom the very course of history has shifted, that Christ has used him as the instrument to accomplish that. But to Festus, he's just an annoying afterthought. And that kind of got me thinking, how often do we make that same mistake? How often do we get to thinking about our lives and what's in front of us and what we're focused on as if it's the most important thing, that we kind of lose sight of other things that are more important? What seems so irrelevant to us can be of great importance to God. I mean, Festus is a Roman governor. Makes sense. He has huge world-shaping things on his plate that he has to tend to. He has to keep the peace. He has to make sure, the taxes are flowing to Rome, which means he has to have a strong economy and business and trade going on in his province. He has to be able to defend the realm if others come to attack. There are millions of people, estimates 2.5 million, maybe 3, in the area that he is ruling over. That's 2 million people whose prosperity or demise are kind of in his hands, the decision he makes. So, I mean, I get it that, okay, here's this guy over here, they're accusing about something, I don't know, what does it matter? So to him, it does not seem important. But he doesn't know that Paul is actually being used to affect the lives not of millions, but of billions. But it makes me wonder, what are the more important things that go on right in front of us that we either dismiss or don't notice, that we, like Festus, often kind of think that doesn't matter if we even recognize it at all? Right? Because many of the Jews of Jesus' day, they were so focused on their Roman oppression and wanting deliverance from that, they didn't recognize when the Messiah came, because they were wanting something different than what Jesus was there to offer. The Jewish leaders were so concerned with their power and their legalistic religion that they're able to control that they couldn't see how a humble carpenter turned rabbi was actually the Christ. Do we sometimes do the same? Are there things that we put as utmost importance that maybe they're good, they're important, but we're letting them get in the way of what is the more important things? The Bible actually warns us that good things can be a distraction from what matters most. In Matthew 25, I'm not going to read through the whole passage, it takes up most of the chapter, where Jesus says that Jesus judges the nations, that he separates the nations on his left and on his right, like separating the goats from the sheep. And he says to them, either, I never knew you, or welcome to the kingdom. And the basis that he gives for that judgment is their care or lack of care for those who are hungry, who are thirsty, the stranger, the naked, the sick, the oppressed. And it says, the king will answer and say to them, assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did it, or did not do it, to one of the least of these, my brethren, you did it, or did not do it, to me. We are created in the image of God, and everyone around us, every person we see, all of our family members, our friends, our coworkers, our neighbors, that guy who cut you off in traffic, every person around us, no matter how much we admire them or how much they annoy us, they are still created in the image of God. They are still someone that as we treat them, it's reflecting on the one whose image they are created in. Do we get so busy trying to fulfill a religious checklist that we forget what Jesus said is the real focus? Right? Whenever he's asked what's the greatest commandment, of course the greatest commandment is love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. But the second, which is equally not optional, is like it in that you love your neighbor as yourself. 1 Corinthians 13, we love jumping ahead to verse 4, but when you look at the first 3 verses, I like to skip those because they can get a little uncomfortable. It says, though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but I have not love, I have become a sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could move mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, but have not love, it profits me nothing. Think about that list that he just gave. Someone who has those things is someone that every one of us would say, yes, I want to follow that man. That is a great man of God. Someone who is able to speak well and persuade people, who is eloquent and able to communicate the truths of God effectively. Someone who possesses deep and profound understanding and truth. Someone who gives till it hurts, even up to the point of death. Wow, what a person. And Paul says, yeah, you know what? Even if you have all that, but you're not loving, useless, meaningless. That's kind of a hard one. I mean, because that's a list of things we all strive for. But even more important than those things is love. Titus chapter 3, verse 8, Paul says, this is a faithful saying, and these things I want you to affirm constantly, that those who have believed in God should be careful to maintain good works. These things are good and profitable to men. Verse 9, I do not like this verse. I would love to remove this verse. But avoid foolish disputes, genealogies, contentions, and strivings about the law, for they are unprofitable and useless. I'm a theology and doctrine nerd. I love to spend my time with disputes over doctrine and points of scripture and the law, and it's so much fun. And I don't think this is saying that those things are necessarily bad. But if the point is following Christ, if the point is becoming more like him, spending our time in debates and disputes and nitpicking over points of scripture and doctrine aren't getting us there. What gets us there is as we follow Christ in our lives and the way that the pattern of our living and our behavior represents him in loving others. But also, if you'd like to debate some theology, I'd be glad to do. Matthew 23. Jesus says, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites, for you pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faith. He's not chastising them for keeping the law. They have to keep the law. They have to be obedient to God. God commands them to do these things. But they're missing the spirit of the law as they strive to be nitpicky about how they follow the letter of the law. They're completely missing the whole point of why the law is there. Yesterday I was doing some work in my yard, and it got me thinking, guys, maybe some of you ladies, how much time do you spend on your yard to have a nice yard, but then don't actually get to enjoy your yard? I mean, how many hours of just sweat and toil is put into maintaining a lawn, maybe having a place to sit, maybe you have some shade or a swing, but you never actually get to sit out in your swing under the shade. But yet you still got to maintain that lawn. You still do everything. You got to do it just right. You got to get out the ants. You got to treat the weeds. And you're so busy maintaining, you forget the whole reason you're maintaining it to begin with. I don't know if that might resonate with anybody. But it's the same thing they're doing with the law. They forget the whole reason of the law in the first place, is to follow after God. But they're so busy nitpicking with the rules that they're completely missing God, who the rules are supposed to point them to. And look at the things that Jesus says that they should have been focusing on. It's actually the same thing that Micah says in Micah 6:8. It says, what does the Lord require of you but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God? That we are supposed to love others. We're supposed to deal justly with other people. Treat them fairly, treat them right as they deserve. And that we are to love mercy. We are to treat people kindly. We're to give them a break. Have some grace, have some forgiveness. And we are to love God. We are to be humble. Let God be God. Let him actually be the one who's making the rules and telling us how to live because, well, he's God, we're not. There are a lot of important things that we might fill our days with and occupy our attention with that are good and wonderful things. Church attendance. Right? I mean, that one's kind of commanded. Hebrews 10:25 says, do not forsake the assembly, but gather together. Right? We do the shoe boxes every year, and that's the gospel going out to hundreds of children around the world. That's amazing. Many of you volunteering at the food pantry, helping those who are in need receive food. We attend Bible studies, we have prayer times, we proclaim the gospel and represent Jesus in public, not hiding our faith. And we contend for the faith in situations where others might be speaking against it or questioning or doubting. Yes and amen, and do all of that. But do not forget why we do all of those things. We can get so busy just doing them just so we can check that off the list. Hey, I'm doing a good thing. And we completely lose sight of the fact that the reason we do those is to draw closer to Christ, becoming more like Him, loving others the way Christ loves us. So let's be careful that in our pursuit of good things, we do not lose sight of the more important things.
That little church on Liberty Hill, come praise the Lord, let your cup be filled. Raise your voices and we'll sing, let God's freedom ring from that little church on Liberty